All right, and I think it's time.
I think it's time to kick it off.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to Real World Reports, BI and Project Online and Project Server. Today our plan is to talk about business intelligence tools and how they can be used to report on Project Server and Project Online. Now, the business intelligence story for Project is largely a SharePoint business intelligence story, and now an Office 365 business intelligence story. Right? We're largely dependent on the tools that are available in those services. Now, there are dozens of tools that we've worked with before and we've worked with recently, and there's a pretty wide array of technologies available, and it's almost impossible to cover all of these in a 75-minute session. Okay? So we narrowed down the list a little bit, and today we're just going to skim a rock over the surface of BI. We're going to hit on a few tools. We're going to look at Excel, Excel services, OData, Power View, and lastly, SSRS. More or less, these are the tools that we are going to focus on today. What's great is that Andrew and I have actually done this presentation a couple times before. Has anybody been to the previous presentations at the prior SharePoint or project conference? A few people? Okay, great. So a lot of new faces. Now, if you haven't been to those sessions, they're recorded. They're available, so you can look at them. They are still very applicable, mainly to on-premises Project Server, but as products and services evolve, we try to evolve our presentation a little bit, and today we focused a little bit more on Project Online. So we selected those previous tools because they can be used to extract data and build reports on Project Online. Now, like I said, we'll focus mostly on Excel, Power BI, and SSRS. We'll take a look at those. But before we get started, a little bit more about ourselves. My name is Mike McLean. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft. I work on the engineering team. I've been at Microsoft for about 9 years. I most recently shipped Project Online, a new service. It was a really exciting project to work on. And prior to that, I helped ship SharePoint Online in Office 365. So that was a blast as well. I've also spent a few years working in Microsoft Dynamics on a few different financial reporting and analytics tools. But I love the BI space. It's a really exciting space. There's a lot of great technologies to work with. There's a lot of posts available on the project blog that explain some of the demos you're going to see here today. So I encourage you to go take a look at those, sort through. There's a lot of useful information as well. So now I'll hand it off to the quarterback of the day, Andrew Levinsky.
Who will try to channel his inner Peyton Manning
Yes.
to deliver the demos with the usual amount of success, I suppose. All right, so my name is Andrew Levinsky, no relation to Monica. I am with a company by the name of UMT. And I know for some of you who have attended our presentations in the past, we do believe in being stewards of our environment, so we will be recycling all the same jokes that you have heard in the past. I am with UMT, and for those of you who probably did not hear the keynote or see our ginormous exhibit out in the conference room or in the expo hall, UMT focuses on portfolio management, on financial governance of projects, and on generally helping organizations get better at binding what they do with what they actually want to do. I am a project MVP. I've worked with Mike now for a couple years on this presentation. I do have a blog, and something I would stress is don't get too worked up about trying to take notes as we work through this presentation. Every demo we're going to show you has been blogged or will be blogged in the near term. We've got step-by-step instructions. So just focus on understanding what you can do, not necessarily how you do it. The how you can find after the conference, and we'll provide you with plenty of links. And I'm also available via Twitter. I am based in Houston. Any Houston people? Woo! Yes, all right, awesome. So, before we get started, this is something that has become standard in our presentations. We tried to cut it out this time, but we got some pushback, so it's back in. We will need, of course, one volunteer from the audience to help us out. Now, all you have to do to commit is two things. One is you have to commit to actually staying awake for most of the presentation. And two, you need to commit to actually staying here for the bulk of the presentation. You can't cut out in the middle. That would be awkward. Do we have a volunteer? Anyone? Over there. What's your name? Ken. What did I sign up for? Ken, right? Yeah. All right, so Ken is our new Kenometer. So Ken we'll gauge your reaction. What we try to do is shake up all the demos and change them up every time we do this session. And we do that based on your feedback, okay? So what we need to do is we need to calibrate Ken. Every time we show you something interesting, you will make some sort of auditory response. A cheer, a hoot, a catcall, something. Ken will then gauge that on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, everyone got that? Does that make sense? So what we will do now is we need to calibrate our Kenometer. So let's pretend that we just showed you the most exciting feature ever. This is like a single button on the ribbon. You click on it, it manages your entire schedule, shoots out status reports every week, shoots it to your boss, tells them how wonderful you are. How would you respond if we showed you that? No, that was pretty weak. That was a warm-up. I realize it's been a long day already. Let's try it one more time. How would you respond if we showed you that? Thank you. All right. Now, let's pretend. That's a 10, by the way, Ken. You got it? All right. Let's pretend we showed you the worst feature ever. This is a button that's probably mislabeled, and you click on it, it deletes everything in your schedule, shoots out emails to everyone in the company telling them basically that you're not fit to be managing projects. How would you respond if we showed you that? Did that come from the Belgian contingent?
I think.
All right. Let's try it one more time. How would you respond? Ooh. All right. That's a 1. Got it? All right. So everything we will do today, we're going to gauge between 1 and 10. Maybe we can get to 11. We'll see. It's always a challenge. Great. So we got our volunteer. Let's move on. So here we've got a list. And again, for those of you who have attended prior sessions, this list gets shorter and shorter every time we do the session. It is my fervent hope that the next time we do this session, I will have one item on that list, and that will be Excel. Because let's face it, we can pretty much get rid of every Microsoft product except for Excel and live pretty happy, right? And that honestly is the BI story. If you ask me, 20 years from now, when my kids have graduated college with a liberal arts degree and they can't get a real job and they go into IT and they get forced to develop reports, all they will use is Excel. They will be like SSRS, I don't even know what that is, right? All right, so we're going to talk through this. Now, for those of you, okay, show of hands, how many of you are actually using Project Server in some capacity at this point? I would assume most everyone in the audience. All right, so with Project Server, it's pretty traditional, right? You got the server, and you got the data in 2 different forms. There's something called the OLAP cube. There's something called the database. That's still there in 2013. So in 2013, in 2010, 2007, 2003, you build the reports against either the OLAP cube or the database. That's what's available on premises, okay? When you start talking about the cloud, you don't have access to the database, which leads you to the entire conundrum. How do I report on data when I can't actually access the database, right? So in 2013 in the cloud, you've got your reporting data that is surfaced via something called OData that we will talk about in just a little bit. And until yesterday, basically, you could open up Excel, consume OData, and generate nifty reports. As of yesterday's keynote, though, I'm proud to say, or pleased to say, that we don't only use Excel. We have other options in terms of developing reports. Today, we're going to show you SSRS, which, and again, show of hands, how many of you were actually in the keynote and awake when we were talking about the SSRS stuff? All right, it's a fair number of people in the audience. Good, good. So that's what we're talking about today. Almost everything we will cover today is applicable to both on-premises and in the cloud. There are maybe 1 or 2 minor exceptions to that. And as Mike pointed out, there's a lot of other options that are available also on-premise in terms of like Visio services, that kind of stuff, which we do have a lot of recordings about that you can catch up on. So that's pretty much it for the song part of the presentation. Now we go to the dance part of the program, and Mike's going to kick us off.
Great. So when we launched Project Online, we had a pretty significant challenge ahead of us. We knew that customers would not have direct access to their database in Office 365, like Andrew just explained. And it would have been an option to say, well, we could just release Project Online. You can create project schedules. You can upload information. But reporting is kind of tough. We'll figure that out later. Well, we introduced this OData service after talking to a lot of teams at Microsoft. And we tried to understand what direction teams were going in terms of how to extract data from online services and then build the reports that they need. So we landed on this thing called OData, and it stands for the Open Data Protocol. Now, this is a new protocol that's being developed, and it allows us to expose that reporting schema through an XML data feed. And you can access this from your tenant in Project Online. So let's flip over to, let's see here. And, oops. That's our slide notes. And now I'm going to show you where to find that OData endpoint on your tenant in Project Online. So here we have a tenant that's running in our production data center in Project Online. You can see PWA is provisioned right here off of the SharePoint site collection. And if I delete this at the end and I add underscore API / project data, this is where I can find my endpoint for my OData service. Now you'll have a separate endpoint for each instance of Project Web App. And you can see here in the browser, this is an XML feed, and it outlines all of the tables that we expose in the reporting schema in Project Online. So yesterday in the keynote, we talked about the endpoint a little bit. This is where you can access it, and this is what these entities look like. Now, at the end of the URL, I can do some interesting things. I can type projects, and then I can see all the properties for just the project's entity. I can extract and work with project names, project end dates, project finish dates, a lot of different types of information. Now, if I copy this URL to project data, and I open up a brand new Excel worksheet, thanks to these enhancements in Excel 2013, you can actually pull OData directly into Excel. So I'll click Data from Other Sources. You'll see a new option called From OData Data Feed. Now here I can just paste in my URL. And when I hit Next, it's actually going to connect to Project Online and pull down that full list of tables. So see, this is exactly the same list that we just saw in the browser. It's a little bit less scary. Okay, there's no tags around it. We can actually work with it in a nice dialogue. So for this demo, I'm just going to pull in the project's data just to show you how to drop data into Excel. So when I click Next, we'll create a connection, overwrite the one we have, and we'll just create a real simple table. So here we're going to drop this data into Excel. Now I could pull in risk data, I can pull in lots of other data along with this, and just like that, I have my data from Project Online in Excel. All right, so let's pause. Hold on, let's pause for a minute. I see. Okay. Let's see how this rates on our new Canometer. All right?
All right.
Okay. What did you say, Ken? About a 5?
5.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. We got a lot of room to work with here. Lots of demos left. All right. So now you'll see in that demo, I just pulled the projects table. Now, with OData, I can append things to the end of that URL. So there's actually a syntax around OData. Now, we're not going to go into all of the different variables and syntax you can use today, but if you visit www.odata.org, there's a lot of information, and like Andrew said, we have a lot of blogs about this. So I can append different values to the end of that URL, and I can filter the data that I retrieve. So instead of returning all of these properties, maybe I just need to return my project description, or my finish date, or my start date. So one way to do that is to construct a nice URL that filters out that information. But I'll introduce you to a different tool. There's not a lot of people that know about this. It's called LinkPad. So LinkPad is a tool, and we kind of refer to this as a SQL management studio of OData. All right? Now, this is a free tool. You can download this. And this allows you to build queries in a more structured format in a syntax that you might be a little bit more familiar with. So here, I'm selecting information from my task baselines, my project name, task baseline finish date. But I can also open up other queries if I want. I can store as many as I like. Now here I've actually connected to my Project Online tenant. And when I run this query, it's actually going to give me a snapshot of the data from my online tenant. So you can see right here in LinkPad, I can see what type of data I'd be working with before I take this to Excel. Now, what's even greater is when I click the request log link, here it actually builds that full URL for me. So previously, we just pulled in project data into Excel. But like I explained, I can narrow down the entities, and I can filter. So here I'm actually filtering out baseline information, baseline finish date, and lots of other data. So now if I take this to Excel and I paste it in that dialog, I can retrieve a smaller set of data, and my reports might perform a little bit faster. All right? So let's see how this rates on the Canometer.
Yeah. All right.
Very nice. Great. Now I'll hand it back to Andrew, and he's going to walk us through some real reports.
Okay. So What we'll start with is probably the simplest report that I would say 99.9% of all of our clients ask for, and that is something called a major milestone report. So let me just kill that. Sorry, Mike. And I'm going to open up project. So here what you see is a typical project plan. Now in this project plan, I've added a custom field called major milestone. All right, a lot of companies do that. It's pretty standard. And then in their schedule, you would add those major milestones. So maybe I've got 7 stage gates or review gates, something like that. And as I work through my project plan, I'm going to add those. And now I want to report on them. And I'm going to do that using OData. Now, just to alleviate any confusion, I can still go into the SQL database if this is on premises. So if this is on premises, I can write a SQL query. I can pull the same data. What we're trying to show you today is using OData to accomplish the same thing. It's you know, the beauty of the Microsoft platform is, of course, there's 17 ways to accomplish everything. So what we're going yeah, all right. So what we're going to do is we got a query already built. I'm just going to open it up. It's our major milestone query. So what you see in this query is I'm just pulling 4 fields. I'm pulling the project name, the major milestone, the finish date, and the finish variance for that task. Awesome. All right, I'm going to execute that just to make sure my query works. Look, I've got all my data. I'm going to generate that URL. Let's grab that. Hold on. There we are. And again, I'm just going to open up Excel. I'm going to open up a blank Excel sheet, and I'm going to grab that data. So again, data, other sources, OData. I'm going to paste that URL in that I've already prepared. I select that. And we're going to insert that as a table. So here I've got my data. Life is good. Now what I want to do is summarize that, and I'm going to just create a pivot table. So in this pivot table, I'm going to add my project name, my major milestone, my finish date, and let's just format it properly. Let's drag this over here. Let's see, this is going to be a little bit of a problem here. All right, so far it looks pretty good, and then all we need to do is we're going to show values. Let's see, we're going to change the settings. Pretty exciting, I know. Controlling your excitement. You're doing a very good job of it. And tell you what, let's turn off the grand totals because that's not going to make any sense. And now what do I have here is a view of all of my projects and the projected dates on when I'm going to hit every major milestone, and approximately how long did that take me to do? About a minute, maybe a little bit less. Right. How does that rank on the Kenometer? All right, it's not bad. What was that? 7, a solid 7. Solid 7. All right, I'll take that. That's good. But let's, it's not a report unless it's got pretty colors. So let's add some pretty colors. So what we're going to do now is let's add another pivot table. So I'm going to create a pivot table here. And I'm going to use that same data connection we already created. And I'm going to pretty much create the same pivot table with one exception. I'm going to add the variance and the project name and the major milestones. Now what this is showing me is the variance in terms of when those tasks were scheduled and where they're currently forecast, right? The finish variance for those major milestones. And now what I can do is add some conditional formatting. So I'm just going to go back to my home. I'm going to do, and again, all I need is some pretty simple Excel skills. I'm going to set that up as a formula. So where this, let's see, B3 is greater than, let's say, 160, it's going to be red. Sounds about right. Let's set that as red. That's pretty late, obviously. And looks good so far. Let's add some conditional formatting. Oh, let me just copy this for a second. There we are. Let's create a new rule now. And we're going to set the same formula. And in this case, we're going to say if it's greater than 0, it'll be yellow. Let's go with 80. We'll be a little lenient. Again, it's all demo. We're just making up data here. All right, so far looks good. And then just one more rule. If it's less than or equal to 80, which is pretty lenient, then it'll be green. All right, so far pretty straightforward. And now we just need to manage our rules. So we wanted to apply the red rule first, and then the yellow rule. And voila, we now have a formatted milestone chart that's showing me red, yellow, green based on when we're expected to hit that gate. How does that rank on the chronometer? It's good. Still hovering in the 7, 8 range, I'm thinking. All right, we bumped it up to 8. All right, now how do we surface this? Do we send out an Excel document? We can. The other option is just to throw that into SharePoint. And in SharePoint, let's go find it. We have a set of reports, and in this case, this is a report that I have added, and this is our major milestone report. And this, of course, can be rendered in Excel services. Now, what is the beauty of Excel services? Anyone know? It's real time, it's connected. There's one more thing. This is the key thing that everyone's asking for. Any device. You can do this on an iPad. So you can actually surface these reports on a mobile device, like a Surface, which of course we would all prefer. But if they have not upgraded from an iPad to a Surface, then this would also work. And you'll note you've got the full access to the fields. I can drag them around. I can filter based on variance. I can do all sorts of stuff here based on how it renders. All right, so that's a basic report in Excel. Now let's kick it up a notch. And let's talk about more complex reports. So that report was pretty simple. That report was a single table of data. And how often do you have to report on a single table of data? Typically, you've got to take 3 or 4 or 5 tables, join them all together, and create a more complex model. Now, the solution for this in 2013 is instead of writing a SQL query that joins everything together, we're going to use a free add-in in Excel called Power Pivot. Anyone familiar with Power Pivot? A couple folks? All right. Woo! Yes.
Power Pivot fans in the audience?
Yeah, I can tell. All right. So in Power no, let's try that one again. Oh, wait. Now you distracted me. All right. Power Pivot. Let's try that one more time. Oh, OK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a document. And in this document, I have created 3 connections. So I'm pulling in baseline data, I'm pulling in forecast data, I'm pulling in project header data. So that's 3 different tables out of my OData feed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to join them together. And to do that, again, I'm just going to open up Power Pivot. Now what you'll see is Power Pivot opens up a second window within Excel. And within this window, I can see my data. And I also have a time set. I'm using that to do some filters. And what I can now do is create relationships between those different OData feeds. So in this case, I'm going to link my forecast data with my project header data, my baseline data with my project header data, and then because I want to slice and dice by dates, I'm going to join this with my set of dates. So now what I've got is one model where I've joined all these different tables. If I go back into Excel, I can now create a pivot table using that data. And you'll see here in Excel now, I've got this table tab. And I can actually pull all of that data, and it's just going to automatically generate all the connections. It's almost like a set of VLOOKUPs. And what I'm going to do now is create a cumulative milestone report. Now, that's going to take me just a little bit of time. So while I'm doing that, if you got some questions, Mike's going to field a couple questions.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, we have one right here in the front.
Permissions to use OData.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a SQL Server permission or SharePoint permission?
Good question. So the question was, how do the permissions work around OData? Is it managed in SQL Server, or how does it work? So the great thing about OData is that it's secured based on your tenant. So I'll talk about Project Online. You will only have access to that OData service at that URL if you're authenticated into your tenant. So that's the first step. So in these demos, we're actually logged in as Sarah D. She's a user and a tenant. She has access to Office 365, so she can hit that URL. Now it's also based on the permissions that are set in Project Online or Project Server. So generally, portfolio managers, project managers, those permissions will have access to the OData service, but you can restrict it from other team members. Because when you use that OData feed, it exposes data for all the projects in your portfolio. So we generally leave that to the portfolio managers or above. So question in the back? SSIS? Oh, RBS. Right. No, it wouldn't have any impact to that. Right. Yeah, that's separate. Yep. Good question. Any other questions? Oh, right there, Ben. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, so the question is, how does it work with SharePoint permission mode? So if in SharePoint permission mode, there's a default set of permissions that are available and they're set out of the box. I think there's one permission that's at a lower level that's focused on the team member. So those would also map similarly to project permission mode. So if you're a team member in that SharePoint permission mode, then you wouldn't have access to it. Now, if you, for example, if you create a document library in SharePoint and you place all those reports in there, anyone who you share that document library to will have access to the reports. What they won't have access to, or potentially not have access to, is the ability to refresh the data in those reports. So when you open up a report from that doc library, you may be able to see the Excel file, but if your user doesn't have permission to the feed, you can't pull any new data in. So there's kind of a couple different layers there when you're working in SharePoint. So great, another question? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question is, we saw how to join tables in Power Pivot. Can you join tables with OData? Now, what's interesting in Excel is that when you bring data into native Excel from OData, like we showed earlier, it'll actually add it to the internal model that's inside the Excel workbook. And there's actually an option in the ribbon, I think it's on the Data tab, called Relationships. So you can actually create relationships and joins across the data that you've brought in. So it's kind of a nice feature in Excel 2013. They tried to bring some of that Power Pivot functionality just directly into Excel. So how are we doing?
Good. I think we got it.
Okay, we'll definitely take more questions later. I'm going to let... Oh, follow up?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
In trying to do that, all I saw was a one-to-one relationship. I couldn't see, like, you were trying to, what you did in the other one, being able to say, do 2, 3, 4 relationships, because you need to, like, have 2 tasks, between, like,
It gives you one-to-one unless you ask for a data item, and then it'll just give you the actual result.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that OData joins are more limited than if I was just to open up SQL and start writing the query and everything. And that's just a mindset that either needs to change to use OData. It's not SQL. So if I come from a SQL mindset, it's kind of harder to adapt than if I start kind of fresh. You can basically recreate a lot of what you would do in SQL in OData. You just have to get a little creative about how you do it. And there's also another, I don't know if product's the right word, an add-on to Excel called Power Query,
yeah.
Which also gives you that front-end power to build different queries against different data sources. So the key here is not just Project Server, but I can pull in data from other data sources, Service Desk, financial products, et cetera, and merge it all together in Excel, either on premises or in the cloud. So there's a lot of permutations there. We're not going to really talk about Power Query because we decided that there's way too many power things in the world, and it would just confuse everyone. So suffice it, it exists. We do have a couple blog posts on it. You're welcome to take a look. And that right there is what we're calling our cumulative milestone report, which shows me cumulative milestone. I can filter it by time. I can filter it by project. And it gives me a good overview of the performance of a project. And how do we do that? 3 OData feeds, links, and then some creative Excel charting. And that was pretty much it. So how does this rank on the Canometer? Yeah. What was that? So that sounded like a 7-8 still. So we're still in the solid 7-8 territory. I think that's pretty good. And now I'm going to kick it back to Mike for more discussion of Power BI, I believe.
All right. Let's see here.
No. So the question is this a new chart type in Excel 2013? No, that is a combo chart. So what I've got is basically a bar chart, and then I've got a line chart overlaid on top of it. The bar chart's against the axis on the left. The line chart's against the axis on the right. The only difference in 2013 is there's actually an interface that you can do it all at once. In 2010, you have to click on each data series and change it, which is not a big deal. Do I find 2010 a bit volatile? In 2013, so there is a minor issue in combo charts in 2013 where if you pick a data set that doesn't include both data series, it reverts back to like a bar chart. And it happens. I would kick it to the Excel team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great question. Was there one more question?
Yeah, I just had a couple of new options. For example, you did secondary access, which is like a little checkbox.
Yep.
Those all new in 2013, some of those options that you...
So yes, in 2013, there are some new options with charting in Excel. And we'll actually talk about Power View and charting and maps coming up in a little bit. So great questions.
All right, great. So we just walked through a few demos where we showed how to access your OData service, how to pull that into Excel. Andrew walked through the major milestone report, and then we showed how to create some relationships and build another report in Power Pivot. So let's move on a little bit, and we'll talk about data. So the world of data is changing. This is probably one of the most exciting times ever in the world of data. The amount of data and the volume of data is growing at a tremendous pace. There are more types of data and more shapes and sizes than ever before. And a lot of this is generated by a few different areas: new data sources, images, user data. How many people are on Facebook? Everyone, right? There's tons and tons of data that's being generated about how users act, how they behave, even in the enterprises. Using features like Yammer, you can see how people are engaging. All of that is generating data. Now, users are also collaborating a lot more. And when you look at Gartner, they even commented by 2015, organizations that have great information management infrastructure will outperform their peers by 20%. And I think McKinsey agreed with the statement. So there's a ton of data, and users are also collaborating and trying to access this data and work with it. Now, Microsoft realized that, so they introduced a new suite called Power BI. Now, have folks heard about the Power BI suite? Some might have heard about it. A few hands? Great. Okay. So Power BI is a new service that's been introduced in Office 365. This is still in preview. So right now it's in a preview phase. You can go up, you can sign up for it, you can check it out. But it offers a few different things. It tries to bring the ability to do self-service reporting to Office 365. There's a few different add-ins that we'll talk through. And when you subscribe to Power BI, the first one we'll mention is Power Query. So Power Query, Andrew alluded to this earlier, is used to extract data into Excel. So this is more of an ETL. So this is something that they're trying to build into Excel, so you can extract data out, you can work with it, and one of the data sources you can connect to is OData. Now, we're not going to show this today, but I just wanted to mention it because it's one of the pillars in the Power BI suite. Now, the next one we'll mention is Power Pivot. So you saw this, Andrew showed a demo of it. Power Pivot is more focused on the modeling capabilities. All right, so Power Query is focused on extracting data into Excel, trying to enhance that experience. Power Pivot is focused on modeling. It actually takes advantage of the memory on your machine to do some really powerful calculations and analysis capabilities. Here, you can create relationships, you can create different hierarchies, and then build key performance indicators, and do a lot of great things. Now, the third add-in is Power View. Now, Power View is focused more on the visualization aspect. So with Power View, you can build some really great reports that have a more dashboard look and feel. Now, previously, if you built reports in Excel, they're largely focused on rows and columns, and you have these grids. And that's why a lot of customers look at something like SSRS, because you have a nice free-form layout where you can move components around. Well, Power View is trying to address some of those needs in Excel. So you can add charts and graphs, and you can move different tables around. Maybe look at visualizations and play them. So Power View has a more dashboard look and feel. And there's even a report for Project Online right out of the box. So now let's jump into a demo where we can actually see a little bit of Power View and how this works. Got it? Mm-hmm. Great. So let's flip back to, I think, are you A?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Great. So in this demo, we have a set of data in Project Server, and we added a custom field called Office. Okay? Now, Office is going to represent location, because it would be really hard to do a great BI demo without some type of a map. Okay? Would everybody agree? Lately, everybody wants a map. They want to see where their data is. So we added a custom field to Project Server called Office. Now, here we populated a location. It's real simple. Now, in LinkPad, we wrote this query that's going to pull a list of our projects where their location is not null, and we're also going to pull their cost information. So here in LinkPad, I can see the list of data I'm working with, all the various columns. So I'm just going to copy my URL. Now I'll come over to brand new Excel workbook. And we're going to drop this in just like we did before. And we'll select our data, click Next, and finish. That's fine. But this time, we're just going to create the connection to the data. So we just created the connection, and we pulled it here into our workbook. Now, before I do anything with it, I'm going to go into Power Pivot, and I'll open up my Power Pivot window. And here, I can actually change the data types that are mapped to these columns. So my office column is going to be mapped to city. And actually, it already suggested it for me. So Power Pivot's pretty smart. So I've mapped that to city. Now I'm going to close out. So now up here on the ribbon, I can click Insert Power View. And it's going to create a brand new Power View sheet in my Excel workbook. So this is a nice blank canvas. And on the right, I can start selecting my fields. So let's add office, and let's add total cost. So here it added a table over here in my Power View canvas. And there's a map button right up here on the ribbon. So when I click map, you'll see it actually converts my table into this great visualization where I can see where all my projects are located. And I have these great circles that show where my most expensive projects are. All right, so now I'm not going to stop yet because I'm going to drag over my project name list to the bottom. And then I'm going to add total cost to my table here. And let's stretch this out so you can see that a little bit better. Now, as I click through and I start working with this data, you can see it filters a chart down below. Isn't that cool? So I can see a nice summary there. Okay, and if I want to give this a title, call it obligatory map demo. And just like that, I have a great report that's built in Power View. Of course, you can do a lot of other things, but here I have a nice visualization pulled right into Excel with my data from Project Online. How does that rate on the econometer? All right, making some traction.
All right. What was that?
9.
That's 9.
All right.
Now,
Great.
if I could just jump in here. Now, what we're using here to generate this map is actually Bing Maps. So any address or location that works in Bing Maps will work for this map. What does that mean? I do a lot of work in oil and gas, and so we do a lot of mapping of where rigs and projects are. And nothing's worse than dropping a rig in the middle of downtown New Orleans. So if you can actually get latitude, longitude, you can actually put that in the same field. You just basically have a free text field. It will have either New Orleans or the latitude, longitude, or whatever Bing Maps will accept pretty much works in this map. It allows you a lot more flexibility in locating your projects. So,
Great. So now Andrew's going to show us how to take Power View into SharePoint.
So now is where it may or may not get confusing. So we've got Power View for Excel. And you can create this in Excel. I can distribute this in Excel. I can just push the Excel to SharePoint, and you can consume it in SharePoint. But we also have a pure SharePoint-based version of Power View, and that's what I'm going to show you. The beauty of it is it looks exactly the same as a Power View in Excel, but it's in SharePoint. So let me show you what that would look like. Let me just close all this. And I'm going to go to, not that. Let's try that one more time. There we are. All right. Let's pull up PWA. And so this has already been configured. This is actually configured on an on-premises instance. And in this instance, I've turned on a couple features. And within that, I'm going to go to my report center, my BI center. I'm going to go to data connections. And because I have provided this data, this is a set of demo data. Basically, it's a list of countries and investments that we're going to make in these countries. I do need to point out a disclaimer. This is totally random. This is not supposed to represent the data set of any company that we may or may not have ever worked with. Totally random. But anyways, in SharePoint, you see that we now have an option to create a Power View report based on the data set. So we can actually give people access to a specific data set and then allow them to create their own reports. Again, you see I'm in the browser. I get the same interface that Mike was working with. And just because he did a map, now I got to do a map too. So let's throw a map on there. Let's throw country. Let's throw current forecast. And let's throw phase on there. And you see it all showing up over here. Let's just change that into a map. It's a little on the small side, so let's, there we are. And let's put the legend down below. And it's okay, so what we see here is that same map, so that's not so exciting. And we also, now we're splitting it out by phase. I can drill in, I can drill out, I can move around. Pretty exciting stuff. But let's see if we can kind of make that a little better. I'll tell you what, let's do this. What we're going to do is we're going to add a couple filters. Let's make that a little bit longer. And I'm going to say, we've taken this data as time phase data, so I'm just going to drag the date over here. So I just want to see the cost at a specific date and time. It's a little hard to see, so let's make the text a little bigger. There we are. That's a little better. Again, where am I? I'm in the browser. And let's also filter by region. And let's assume that we got the regions all correct in our data. And again, we're going to make that a filter. And now, I tell you what, the map thing we've kind of done to death. Let's change that to a stacked bar chart. So this now shows me all my countries. Obviously, it's a little on the big side. So let's see if we can filter in on this a little bit. And I can now interact with the report. Let's get a little bit more screen space. I can now interact with the report, see what the data look like. I'll tell you what, let's expand this text out just a little bit so you can actually see what it is. And there we are. All right, so how does that rank? And this, by the way, and the resolution's kind of weird. How does that rank on the canometer? Yeah? And this is in the browser. Remember, so we're not using Excel, we're not using anything too exciting here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this. So let's just save it. This is report 1, sounds great, let's go with that. And once we save it, you'll note I have this interesting option right here. Ooh. What do you think is going to happen when I click on that? No idea, it's a mystery. One can only imagine. All right, so let's just call this our demo. And now on my desktop, surprise, surprise, I've got a PowerPoint. And it just basically recreates that report with high fidelity into PowerPoint. How does that rank on the canometer? Wait, what was that? So the question is that dynamic? So first, can we get a score on that before I answer yes or no? What? An 8 or 9? Okay, so the question is it dynamic? Let's see. What do you think? So I'm running Shift F5, right, just like PowerPoint. And if I'm connected to the data, so if I'm either on the corporate network or I can basically see the data, then I should get this little button down here in the bottom right called Interact. And when I click on Interact, this will blow their minds when you do this in a presentation. When I click on Interact, it opens up a window, essentially, into the data, and I get the full web-based experience that I can then interact with as part of my PowerPoint presentation, yeah? Thank you. What was that? That was a 10. All right. Now, again, if you're not on the network, you're not connected to the data, or you're using a device that doesn't support this, I can't imagine a device that wouldn't support this, you get the static PowerPoint experience, which is still pretty good, all things considered. Yes, was there another question? Can it refresh? Yes, this is a live feed back to the data. So when I start hitting interact, it's basically pulling in data, I believe. I might have to double check that.
Right.
Surely,
well, it'll
that would be
refresh
the case.
from whatever's in the workbook, but refreshing the workbook itself is different. So you'd have to configure that separately.
All right, there's a question in the back. Ah, great question. Is this a Silverlight control? And the answer is yes, it is, although there are efforts to port this over to HTML5.
And actually, yeah, like Andrew said, there are efforts to port it to HTML5. If you work with the new Power BI preview, that's in Office 365, you actually have the ability to look at Power View reports in the browser and toggle to the HTML5 version if you want to see how it works before they actually finalize the conversion. So,
right.
Good
And this is actually a common question that comes up. So for those of you not familiar with the nuances of Silverlight versus HTML5, it's pretty simple. Silverlight doesn't work on an iPad, or let me rephrase that. iPad doesn't support Silverlight, but it does support HTML5. So needless to say, there's a major push to get all this working in iPad. Now, on the other hand, there is an app that currently is out for the Surface, and I believe it's in beta in the Apple App Store, that will consume and generate these reports in high fidelity. But I would say, yes, it would be wonderful if this was an HTML5. I fully agree with that one. Question in the front.
Yeah, what type of data connection? That wasn't an ODC, was an RSVS? What's that?
It is using SSRS, or an SSRS service in SharePoint to create that data connection.
Right.
Great. Other questions? We got one more thing I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to kick it back to Mike. Yes, sir. Where there'll be a demo data set available. So if you are a partner and you want to demo Project Server, either in the cloud or on premises, there is a demo data set. I think you need to reach out to the partner channel, and they provide, it's the data pump tool that will upload a standard set of data, which is pretty similar to what you're seeing here. So great question. Yes, sir.
Could you export the PowerPoint from Excel as well as the SharePoint?
It's a good question. So can I export the Power View from Excel into PowerPoint? I don't know. I never tried, honestly. Maybe.
I think
we can
as
test it out.
long as you have Power View for SharePoint installed, you can do it from the browser. I have not seen it done from the client yet.
Yeah. I mean, it may be possible. I just haven't tried it. So great. All right. Well, we're going to move on, and we'll have some more time for questions and stuff. So I'll just show you one more thing in Power BI. So this one is still in beta. It's not, well, okay. Well, before we get that far, I did actually have one report I want to show you. So this is a report that I find also pretty useful. What this is doing is this is showing application management, application lifecycle management over time. So in this case, again, we're using Power View. We've got each bubble representing a single application. Along the right axis, or the bottom axis, it's important. So the stuff over on the right is very important, critical even. And the stuff here on the left is representing risk. So the stuff up here, like in the top right quadrant, high risk, and also very critical to the enterprise. Now, our goal as an enterprise is to de-risk these applications. We want to keep it important, but we do want to de-risk it. So one of the things you can do is if you gauge risk, so this would be assuming you collect risk data over time, you can actually start tracking the effect of your projects in terms of de-risking your portfolio of projects. And you can do that by systematically collecting data, and then you can throw it into Power View and actually do it on a time axis. You can animate your data. So let's see, let me try that one more time. Let's see, there's one project I want to track and see what's happening with it. So if we look at this project specifically, I can see the path that it followed. So starting off in our portfolio, we started de-risking it, and gradually it looks like people are stopping using it, and now pretty much we can retire. This allows us to gauge the effectiveness of what we're doing as a PMO, and it's actually pretty simple to generate, assuming you have the data. All right, any questions on that? Nope. Good. All right. So I will show you one more thing. This is something that's still in beta. This is Power BI. This is a site that features a lot of Power BI functionality. You can actually sign up online for a trial tenant. And in the Power BI site, there's a lot of things you can do. So first off, you can actually set up data connections to various on-premises and in-the-cloud data sources and actually link them together. What we're going to show you today is that we've actually added a data source. And this data source, you can actually do something called add to Q&A. So if I click on that, it's going to add it to the Q&A interface. It's effectively going to index the data, so I can now access it via a search engine. Ooh, what does that mean? All right, well, let's take a look. In this case, I've already added my other worksheet, and I'm just going to search it with Power BI Q&A. And this is the point of this demo is really to give you an idea of where Microsoft is going. I'm not sure we're entirely there yet, but we're getting there. So, for instance, now I can just open this up, and based on all the data sources, I can say something like show projects by country. And that looks good. And maybe I want to show a map. And let's get rid of this. So I got some more real estate. I'm going to enable content. All right, so it's showing me a map. OK, that's pretty cool. But we could do a little better than that. Let's see. How about show country? Oh, wait, hold on. Show country, and what I'm trying to do, let's zoom out a little bit. There we are. Wait. There we are. And what I can do is I can actually start playing with it. So once it gives me an idea of what fields I'm going to use, maybe I want to, I've got a filter. I can look at other fields. There we are. And I want to see the forecast. And yes, we have done maps to death. I think we have more maps in our presentation than anyone else. I can look at this as a table. Sounds great. And now I've got all sorts of options, a bar chart. And you see what I did there, though, was I started just writing free text. And I say, hey, like sort by cost descending. Let's see if that works. May not. Exactly. If it did work, it would have been really cool. Country and cost. Sort. All right. By cost. Descending. Is it going to work? No. All right. But it would have been really cool if it had worked.
It's still in preview.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so apparently we're not channeling Peyton Manning because I'm sure he was successful on Sunday. Anyways, that's what Power BI would do, is allow you to do that natural language query of your data, which is pretty exciting. How does that rank on the Canometer? All right, Ken, what was that? All right, so a 9, but we questioned that. All right. Yeah. True. Demo scores always would be higher if it worked, but if it worked, it would be boring. Let's face it. I know you're out there. You want us to fail because that just adds to the excitement and the tension in the room. If everything worked flawlessly, it would be boring. There was a question. Yes, sir.
Actually, it's a comment. I'm from Denver, so we lighten up on the
Oh,
Sure.
there's a request to lighten up on the Manning jokes. Why?
It's okay. Actually, I did give him permission. I'm also from Denver, so
Yeah.
don't worry.
And for the
got your
record,
back.
the Houston Texans did not really have a great season this year, so
Yeah.
I'm not really one to talk. So anyways, that's it. I'm going to hand it back to Mike.
Great. All right. All right. So that was a demo of Power View in Excel, Power View in SharePoint, and a little bit about what's coming in natural language queries. All right. Now, up until now, when we've done this presentation, we've never really had the ability to show anything related to SQL Server reporting services, right? It's mainly been based on Excel. Now, keep in mind, probably when we did a show of hands, maybe 50% of the folks in this room have not seen what we showed in the keynote yesterday. So we'll talk a little bit about what was shown and the SSIS and SSRS solution, and then we'll walk through a demo again, all right? Now, like I said, we haven't really had the opportunity to connect SSRS to Project Online yet because it doesn't run. SSRS is not available in Office 365. Now, when we met with customers and partners, there was a pretty significant need to be able to extract data and combine it with other data sources on premises from other lines of business. So it wasn't just about, oh, well, we need to build SSRS reports. It was the fact that a lot of organizations already have departments, teams that build reports, and they use those types of technologies, and they use those and they want to continue using them and use them with other types of data as well. So we took this feedback, and the project team met with the SQL Server engineering team, and this resulted in a set of enhancements. So now in SQL Server 2012, with the upcoming feature pack that's going to be released pretty soon, you'll actually be able to use SSIS over here to extract data using OData. Now, SSIS is a tool available from SQL that's used to extract data. You can build packages. If I extract one piece of information, I can combine it with another. I can build workflows in. So if my extraction fails, I can fire off an error, and I can notify people. So it's a pretty powerful technology, but it's kind of one of the industry-leading tools for performing an ETL. So when you look at Project Online, we have users that access Project Web App, and they're navigating their pages. All of that data is stored in Office 365, right? That's this cloud up here. Now, using SSIS, you can connect via the OData feed. We just spent about 60 minutes or so walking through a bunch of demos of connecting OData to Excel. Well, you can connect SSIS to OData as well and pull that data down. Now, you could build those packages, and you can run them on premises. So you can pull it down into a data store that you already have, or you can run those packages in Windows Azure using SQL Server in Windows Azure. Now, once you pull that data in, like I said, you put it in whatever store you choose, and then you can build reporting services reports right on top of that. All right? Now, if you remove this cloud, like I said, you can do all that on premises. So there's a couple of different options. So now, what I'd like to do is walk through the demo, and let's see, is this one, that one is you, this one is me. Now, what I thought might be a little bit more interesting is if we actually build that package from scratch right here on stage. Would you like to see that? Okay. All right, so let's do that. Now, yesterday we showed a package that was already built. We'll build that same package so you can see the clicks that I go through to create that, and then we'll take a look at those reporting services reports. So the only thing I did before running this demo is that I installed SQL Server, right? And when I did that, I included the SQL Server data tools. So this gives me a set of tools that I can work with in Visual Studio to connect to my data. So I'll just start Visual Studio from scratch, and I'll create a new project right here, File, New Project. And I have a few different options for different business intelligence functionality. So I'll select Integration Services Project, click OK, and I have a canvas here. Now, the first step is to connect to the SQL Server database where we're going to put our data. So I'll use OLADB. We'll click Add. And you can see here I'm just connecting to my local machine. And I'll click OK. I probably should have tested that connection. All right, that works. Great. So now I'm going to connect to my OData. Now we're going to connect to Project Online because that's where we're going to pull data from. All right. Now when I right-click and I select New Connection, you'll see a brand new option here called OData. So OData is treated just like any other data source in SQL Server Integration Services. When I click Add, I can give my connection a name. We'll call this Project Online. I have my URL to OData right here. So I can paste that in to my location. And I'll tell it to use a specific user. This could be any user in Project Online that has access to OData. And sorry, I'm not going to copy and paste my password. Now, when I click on the All tab, you'll see a brand new option called Microsoft Online Services Authentication. So I'll select True for that, and let's see if we can connect. Now, this is brand new functionality, including that online services piece. That helps us authenticate to Office 365. Without that, we would just be rejected. So now, I'm going to drag a data flow task over to my control flow. So this is going to let us specify what we're going to do with our data. We're saying we're going to pull in OData. So there's a brand new option here in my toolbox. So I'll drag this over. When I double-click it, I'm going to select my Project Online connection that we just created. So this is my OData connection. You can see it already retrieved the full list of tables that are in Project Online. Pretty neat. Now for this demo, we're just going to select projects, and you can see it already created that URL for me. So it narrowed down my OData URL, and we're just pulling the projects table. If I click columns, this takes a second. It shows me all the properties available for my OData service. So I can uncheck some of these if I don't need them to make this perform a little bit faster. We'll click OK. So now we just need to create our destination. And let's see, it's thinking. Let's give it a second here. Oh, Visual Studio is busy. I'll give it a second to finish whatever it's doing. It's definitely not.
Good time for questions.
It's definitely not busy building our demo.
Any questions?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let's try to restart this.
When will this be available in SQL 2012? That is an excellent question.
It's in the near future. I don't have an exact date for you, but it will be released shortly. Mark? Okay, so Mark says about 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, great.
The other Mark.
Let's see. Let me. Hold on.
How real-time is this data? I would assume you would set a scheduler to import it. So it's not real time. It is just real-ish time. Yes. That is a fair assessment. Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll jump back in here. Actually, you know what? Let's do this.
This should return pretty much all the fields available in OData, which should be all the fields, all the custom fields, et cetera. There's sometimes limitations. There's some fields that just don't exist in the system. Yeah. And there's also, by the way, a known issue. So for instance, if you go create a custom field, which I know a lot of people do, called project space ID in project server, well, the problem there is that the project unique ID field following OData conventions actually is surfaced in OData as project ID. So there's a couple conflicts there that you need to be careful about when you create custom fields. And what will happen is a lot of people do this, create a custom field called project ID, and then your OData feed pretty much stops working. And that's a known issue. There's blog posts about that. There's lists of fields to avoid. Mike,
Great.
you ready to go?
Yep,
All
ready to go. So I jump back into a package that we've already created. So everyone saw the step up until this point, right, where we dragged over the OData source, we specified the connection, and then we clicked OK. So the next step is to drag over the destination assistant, and then this will actually let us select our OLEDB connection. So this was really simple. We selected our SQL Server database on our local machine, and then here we just selected projects, and when we click New, it's actually going to create the table right in SQL Server. So here we'll call this PC248 because that's our session. And when I click Mappings, it's actually going to map all the data over from the OData feed into our table. So I'll click OK, and then we'll flip over to SQL. Let's see if our table's there yet. So here's our brand new table that we just created in SSIS. If I select this, you can see here there's nothing in the table yet. It's brand new. It was created when we clicked OK after specifying our destination. So now when I run this package, it's actually going to connect up to Project Online, and it's going to start extracting that data from our service. Now, you can schedule these packages to run. They can run every day, every week. Right now, we're just running this on demand. And like I said, you can build in a lot of other functionality to the data flow. So if there's errors, you can fire off different workflows. So now when I flip over to SQL Server and I refresh my table, there's all of my data from my projects table in Project Online. Pretty cool? Okay. Aside from the Visual Studio hiccup. All right, so how did that rate, Ken? About an 8? Okay, all right. Well, the goal is to get to a 10 by the end of the presentation, so let's see how we do. All right, so this is how we pull the data down into our local SQL Server. Remember, you could pull this onto on-premises and your site. You can pull this into Windows Azure. So now let's flip over to a real tenant running in our Project Online service. You can see here we're running projectconfreporting.sharepoint.com. So this is in our production data center. Now, down here at the bottom, we modified the quick link, and I created a link to a reporting services report that's running in Windows Azure. So now this is going to pull up, and you can see here, this has a nice SSRS look and feel. We're taking advantage of corporate logos here at the top of the page. We're showing the date the report was last generated. These are highly requested features from our customers. You can see we're using the gauges and the charts that are available on SSRS. And up at the top, if I want, I can filter this data. If I want to look at a different department. So this will refresh, I think. There we go. So I can filter this down if I just want to look at finance data. So I can create one report, and I can look at multiple views right here in the browser. So how does that rate on the Canonimer? Yeah. Great. Now, we could have stopped here, but we took it a couple of steps further. All right. Now, with SSRS, you have the ability to link different reports. So when I click a graph like that, I can link to another report of a different format, and I can see the full list of projects broken out by departments. I can see % complete. I can see some nice key performance indicators with my icons, and even project cost information. So how does that rate on the Canonimer? Okay. Well, I have one more thing to show everyone. I can click a specific project name and drill in to an individual status report just for that project. So here I'm looking at a project status report for the Health Assessment Reporting Tool. And we have a great format. We have a list of rows. If additional rows are inserted, this will expand and contract. This is some of the functionality you need from SSRS. Excel doesn't offer this. You have a fixed list of columns right there in your worksheet. So we can expand and contrast based on the number of rows. And what's great is that once you have this in SSRS, you can take it to any other formatted supported by SSRS. Now, probably the most highly requested format is PDF, right? Because here I can take this report, it's a copy, it's a snapshot, I can archive this off, I can email it to someone, I can print off a copy, and I can put it on my boss's desk for our meeting. So how does this rate on the chronometer? Great.
It's a question over
Good
there.
question?
The text is there, help users evaluate. That text is, was it input?
It was input in Project Online, so it's part of the description of the project. So this was an example using I think it's project description and a set of other custom fields, a lot of other fields available in Project Online. Yeah.
We do our weekly updates, and there's always talking points for every weekly update.
Right.
Numbers.
Right.
Can that be, there's a way to do that?
There are ways to extract notes fields and things like that. It all depends on how you want to build your report. Great question. So this was a demo showing how to use SSIS to extract data from Project Online using brand new features coming in SQL Server 2012 and in SQL Server 2014, and then showing how you can build and visualize some of those reports in reporting surfaces. So I'll hand it back to Andrew. I think we're going to wrap up and leave time for questions.
And lunch.
And lunch, because
And
we're the
lunch.
last thing between you and lunch.
Yes! Woo! All right. So that was the SSRS demo. So again, what have we done today? We skimmed a rock over the surface of what's available. That's just some of the things that are available. There's this entire selection of other things that can be talked about. And in fact, like we mentioned before, we have talked about other stuff in previous conversations or previous presentations that have been recorded and are all available online. There are other BI sessions. I know come to Mark's tomorrow, I believe. And there's a couple this afternoon. I'll point out I'm also speaking at 5 o'clock on a non-BI related topic on just best practices in project tool deployments. And we've got some additional information. Feel free to go hit our blogs, which have the step-by-steps for most of the demos we produced today. And if there's something that's missing, feel free to reach out, grab us, and we'll be happy to post additional information. And I'll just throw our contact information up there. All right, so that's pretty much it. Make sure you fill out your evals. I'll bring up that slide in a bit while everyone's processing this. Any questions? Close this out. Yes, sir.
There are some limitations on OData as far as number of rows that they mentioned. You still have that limitation with Project Online.
So the question is, how do we work around? There are certain limitations on the sheer amount of rows that I can download from OData, and how do I work around that? Mike, how would you respond to
there's
that?
a couple different ways you can work with that. One is and I'll describe some of the differences between on-premises and online. On-premises, if you use OData, you can actually adjust the number of rows that are returned and that page length, so you can increase that. Online, that's set. There's a default setting that we specify in the data center. And now, if for example, your reports are taking a little bit long to run, one of the great advantages of SSIS is you could schedule that to run, so your reports can kind of be refreshed overnight if you're pulling that data in via the package. So if it's taking a little bit long due to the row limit, I would suggest scheduling that. Another way to improve the perf would be to narrow down the columns that you're retrieving in OData, because that adds to the total amount of rows and the data that's returned in the feed. So you can trim it down a little bit, and that'll help as well.
It's a 200-row limit so if I want to sign the data,
Right.
I have 100,000 rows out there that I want to use in OData. So can I get that in Project Online?
Can you get more?
The same OData feed, I understand.
There's actually not a limit. I don't think that there's a limit to the max. I think it's in the per request. It's 200. So if there's more data, it may just take longer to run, and that's why you probably need to schedule it.
Now, I also should jump in here, and we thank Ken for his wonderful participation. We have a wonderful prize. We have a Microsoft Project badge holder.
We have a great, a Microsoft Project badge holder, really fancy, and then we have a Microsoft Project USB stick. I'm not sure if there's anything on here. If there is, you can keep it.
For the record, if you're interested, we actually toyed
Thanks,
around
Ken.
with giving you a set of genuine imported Mongolian socks, which I left in the hotel room. So if you want that, come follow me tomorrow. We can hook you up with it.
I think you had a question. You were waiting real patiently.
So in the SSRS, you show a lot of cool things with the gauges and some of the other things. You talked about that in Excel, you'd be limited, you have to have a set number of rows.
Right.
Other than that, how much of those tools could be done in Excel?
Well,
The SSRS example.
Okay, so the question is, SSRS shows a lot of great features, and we pointed out some of the advantages of using SSRS. How much of that can be done in Excel? So I'll point out a few of the key differences, if that helps. For example, when I say you have a limited number of rows in Excel, I'm mainly talking about when you're designing the visualization, right? Yeah, and that's something that's a problem that we ran into even at Microsoft when we were building our reports. So when you're in that spreadsheet view, you're limited there. You can't really expand that. SSRS allows you to bring in multiple rows, and you have a section there that just dynamically repeats based on the size of your data that you're returning. Now, Excel is trying to improve that with Power View, but unfortunately, even though Power View has a dashboard look and feel, you cannot insert logos into the Power View canvas yet. Some of you might have done that. I see some heads nodding, or tried to. You can't insert, for example, the date the report was last run. It's kind of hard to do. You have to trick it and pull it from a spreadsheet. So those are a couple of the big ones. Also, Power View is limited to a single sheet, whereas the SSRS reports we showed expand. So as you scroll down the page, it can grow and grow and grow. But Power View is limited to a single page right now.
In addition, one of the key differentiators I see is that SSRS can actually PDF and then email via subscription. So every Monday, I get an attached PDF in my inbox. And I'm going to probably get myself in trouble here. One of the things we see a lot is it's kind of a generational attitude that in some organizations, and again, I work in oil and gas, so there are certain demographics that prefer reports that are set in a standard format that arrive in a PDF attached to my email, and that works. And there's another demographic that says, hey, just give me the data, I'll build my own charts, and I'll create my own views and everything. And so we're trying to kind of meet both audiences, but those are distinct, different audiences, oftentimes.
What about that drill down ability?
The drill down, actually, that's a really good point. The drill down ability is very difficult, if not nearly impossible to do in Excel, right? So that's a great advantage of SSRS, because in Excel, if you think about it, you'd be linking to different worksheets and have these hyperlinks to other Excel documents in your document library, and it's kind of clunky, whereas SSRS, you can drill down. Yeah, it's not in Power View yet, right? You can't hyperlink.
Mark. So SSRS also deals with rich text, which is a big issue when you're pulling those multi-line text fields out of Project Server. It's got all those hashtag stuff in it. So yeah, it's much easier in SSRS. Yes, sir, in the front.
Imagine you add a custom list to your project site template for change requests. Can I get that data out?
So the question is, how do I pull SharePoint data? So if I add a SharePoint list or something into a site, right, and I pull that down into SSRS or whatever, it's a good question. I think there's Power Pivot's probably the best way to do it.
Power Pivot would be one way to do it. So a lot of times if you have a custom list, you can take advantage of the list data service. We've done a few scenarios on that before, where you can pull the list data service in, and then you can combine that with other data. As long as you have a column you can connect them on, like project ID or department ID or something like that. So. Yeah. So the comment was, would that work with SSIS and extracting data? And the great thing about this functionality is that since we're authenticating to Office 365, if it's exposed from SharePoint via the list data service, you can access that in SharePoint Online as well. So here we showed connecting to Project Online data. You should be able to connect to SharePoint Online data as well, which would be really cool. And there's probably a lot of great scenarios around that. Good question. Ooh, good question. All right, so the question is, if you create a new custom field in Project Online, will that automatically get, well, actually, there's probably two questions. One is, can you access it via OData, and does your SSIS package update automatically to pull that in? So the way it works is when you add a custom field, it does get dynamically added to your OData feed, so you can work with it in OData. If you're doing something like you're pulling all of the properties and all the fields from projects, it'll naturally be included in Excel. If you're just pulling in individual properties, you'll have to add that to your query string. That's fine. Now, on the SSIS side, you'll actually have to go back into that package and check that box, I believe, to include it, because it would not have been included by default. But then you can pull it in.
Specifically around the custom fields in SharePoint, you have to know, so you're saying that the list
Right. So the questions around the custom fields on the lists, like the risks and the issues list in SharePoint. So I'm not an expert on SharePoint reporting. There's a great conference in a month in Vegas. I'll just point that out. Disclaimer, right? However, so we have demoed that in one of the previous sessions we recorded. We did a power pivot.
Right.
And basically the concept is you take power pivot, you point it at each of the lists, and it'll basically suck in all the custom fields. And then you can do your joins. It's tedious because you have to go out to every list. Mark, for instance, has a wonderful product that centralizes a lot of that and helps you with the reporting. And then in SharePoint, there's actually a couple options. So if on-premise, on an on-premises installation, typically you would write a web service that goes out to all the lists. It collates all the data and makes it available. That's my non-technical description of what happens. I don't know, magic somewhere. And then online, I believe, and I haven't played with it too much, but in 2013, there's actually all sorts of SharePoint options that surfaces data from multiple lists into a format that you can read. I don't know a whole lot of information more than that, though, honestly. So.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think it's right at 11:45. I think everyone wants to grab lunch. Let's wrap up. If you have more questions, you can come up afterwards, or I'll be at Ask the Experts at lunch if you want to talk. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.